And welcome back to Hardball, live from the White House. In the August issue of Vanity Fair, the magazine's national editor, Todd Purdom, has a piece called "It Came from Wasilla" about Alaska Governor Sarah Palin. Here's one nugget from the 2008 campaign about the man who now lives in the house behind us here. Quote, "At least one savvy politician, Barack Obama, believed Palin would never have time to get up to speed. He told his aides that it had taken him 4 months to learn how to be a national candidate and added, 'I don't care how talented she is. This is really a leap.'" Well, joining us for much more on Palin's leap onto the national stage, it's not even been a year, believe it or not, since the world got to know who Sarah Palin was and what she might do next. Vanity Fair's Todd Purdom. Todd, I want to divide this up. It's a 10,000-word must-read for Palin, for people who just obsess over Sarah Palin, and there are quite a few folks out there. I want to divide this up. First, let's look at what happened. And I want to read a couple here. One about what you said. One key McCain aide said, sort of what happened right when she was picked. One key McCain aide said, quote, "I think, as I've evaluated it, I think some of my worst fears, the after-election events, have confirmed that her more negative aspects may have been there." And his voice trailed off. Quote, "I saw her as a raw talent, but a talent. I hope she become better." Tell us more about this rawness and how much of it that maybe the McCain campaign missed.
Well, I think they took one of the great leaps of faith in American political history, and they were desperate. They needed something to shake up that race, and she did shake it up. And you remember being in Minneapolis, St. Paul, how dramatically she took over that convention, the kinds of crowd she got for John McCain on the stump. So in the short term, in the first 10 days or so, it seemed to be working. What happened, though, was what the McCain campaign had not really taken the time to find out was that there was a whole sort of counter story about her in Alaska that was a lot less rosy than the one they sold of a governor with record high approval ratings, 80% support in her state, who'd taken on big oil and so forth. There was always a lot more problems with her than they knew.
Well, here's more of your piece. You say, none of McCain's still loyal soldiers will say negative things about Palin on the record. Even thinking such thoughts privately is painful for them, you write, because there is ultimately no way to read McCain's selection of Palin as reflecting anything other than appalling egotism, heedlessness, and a lack of judgment. They all know that if their candidate, a 72-year-old cancer survivor, had won the presidency, the vice presidency would be in the hands of a woman who lacked the knowledge, the preparation, the aptitude, and the temperament for the job. Todd, those are very tough words. Did you have people in the McCain campaign say this to you, or did you feel like this is what they were saying, read between the lines, this is what we're saying?
I don't want to get into sources and methods, as they say in the CIA, Chuck, but I think it's safe to say that, yes, I did have people who were very close to that situation say in very close to those words just what I said myself. And I think in some ways that's why this whole situation is interesting for history and why it's worth going back to Governor Palin and the whole campaign at this late date. A lot of people ask me, oh, why are you going back over that old ground? Well, first of all, I do think it's really remarkable, and I think it was a singular the only way you can see it is as a singular lapse in judgment by John McCain on the most important decision he had to make as a candidate, that's picking his running mate. And it was really out of keeping with everything he's always said he stood for and everything he did stand for.
Did he lose? Did any of his longtime supporters have they lost faith in him? Did you get that sense?
I got the strong sense from some of them that they could not argue that they wish he's in the White House now. I will say that they felt quite disappointed at what had happened, and they felt that in some ways the whole Palin experience was really a shaking experience for them.
All right, let's talk about Sarah Palin's future. She clearly is popular with some segments of the Republican Party. Here was Senator McCain himself on The Tonight Show back in April. Take a listen.
Who is running the Republican Party? Is it Rush Limbaugh? I mean,
we have, I'm happy to say, a lot of voices out there. Bobby Jindal, Pawlenty, Huntsman, Romney, Charlie Crist. There's a lot of governors out there who are young and dynamic, and there's Mitt Romney did a great job, and he continues to. There's a lot of good people out there, and I've left out somebody's name, and I'm going to hear about it before. But that's what we need.
All right. John McCain doesn't make accidents sometimes. It sounds like he knew he was leaving out a certain name. You certainly took it that way. So does that tell us that maybe...
I take it that way, Chuck, because, I've spent a lot of time watching John McCain over these years in Washington, and his invariable posture when something's uncomfortable for him, and I think this comes from his personality, from the Navy culture, he makes a joke about it, and usually quite a good joke and a very funny joke, and he has a fantastic and sort of self-knowing sense of humor. I don't think there's really any other way to read that.
So you see it as directly John McCain basically saying Sarah Palin should not be a part of the future of the Republican Party as far as president.
Well, he didn't go that far. I mean, he didn't. He's been careful not to say to rule her out. He had another opportunity to say that she was sort of unqualified or something. He didn't take that opportunity. So I think he's just tried to keep an ironic distance from it and pretend that he knows nothing about this gambling in Casablanca. It's a shock to him, sort of.
All right. Well, let's take a look at more of your piece. You followed her to Evansville, Indiana, and you said that she's a star in Evansville and probably in all of the many Evansvilles of America, but there's a big part of the Republican Party, the Wall Street wing, the national security wing, in which she cuts no ice. She could do well in the Iowa caucuses or South Carolina primary, but it is much harder to imagine her making headway in New Hampshire, where independent voters who were turned off by her last fall. It is also difficult to see just how she would expand her appeal beyond that base that already loves her. So this piece and the fact that you had a lot of McCain aides talking to you on background, off the record, in various forms, you think this is going to embolden her a little bit? And she's going to say, you know what, I know everybody, all of these, glossy magazines and these political smarty pants people from Washington are writing me off. I'm going big time whether they like it or not.
I think she is always best when she's, the chips are down. She's surprised people. That's her whole stock and trade in her career. She's proven to have remarkably good instincts at times. I would not write her off, and I think it's significant that people in the Republican Party are reluctant to write her off because they think she's a force to be reckoned with.
They don't seem to know what to do with her. One of the other things you brought up was how she didn't have, there weren't a lot of consultants surrounding her before she was picked. Right, and all of a sudden the McCain campaign sort of dumped a staff of 20 on her. She quickly distrusted. But there is one person who seems to be her lone political advisor, and I've gotten this from my own sources in Anchorage, and that's her husband, Todd Palin. Talk a little bit about Todd's role in her political world, not just in this campaign, but in everything that she's accomplished so far in politics.
Well, there was testimony in the so-called Troopergate investigation that Todd Palin spent about 50% of the time in the governor's office in Anchorage. He often participated in meetings or on calls that he had no official connection to. Here's a guy who's a kind of an outdoorsman, a fisherman, a snow machine racer, a high school graduate, and he has been remarkably involved in every aspect of her career. I think everyone thinks that he's her most trusted advisor. I had the occasion to meet him very briefly in New York, where he was promoting Alaska fishing at an event in Soho in Manhattan, and he's a very attractive, interesting guy who's had an interesting life, but not a typical. He's not the power behind the throne in a typical political marriage. Let me put it that way.
But savvy enough to make phone calls in South Carolina, right?
Apparently so, and certainly savvy enough, or not savvy enough, as the case may be, to make phone calls on our behalf in Alaska.
Very quickly, you will be attacked on this piece for not having a lot of direct quotes from people on the record. Defend yourself on that.
Well, one of the things I've learned as a magazine writer is in some ways the most useful information you get is the kind of information that people are not willing to attach their names to. And I know this is a subject of great criticism in journalism, but, I try to think of myself as not writing for the news cycle today, but writing something that 10 or 15 years from now, if people read it, they'll say, well, gee, you know what? That turns out to be pretty close to the truth. And if I've managed to do that, I'll feel I can sleep at night, even if the people are anonymous.
Well, there's no doubt you're one of the best writers and reporters that I've met in this business. So, Todd Purdom, thanks very much.
Thank you, Chuck, and good luck. Good night.